Hi, Paula.
Hi, Peter.
Well, just the delay. I tried to send a message saying I was going to be 5 to 10 minutes late, but then it looks like I didn't actually get the message sent. Also, I wanted to show you this. It was on the cover of your book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I already saw. Nice. Yeah.
How are you doing? And do you have anything you'd like to share or any questions you'd like to especially explore today?
No, not at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to share a reading from, I think I brought the right book. Kriya Yoga Exposed. I mentioned the books by Santata Gamana. He's written this series of books, which include titles like Kriya Yoga Exposed, Hidden Secret of Kriya Yoga, Hidden Secret of Tantra. These kinds of titles. And yeah, this
Can
one.
you repeat it, the name of the
Author
author?
Santata Gamana.
Santata Gamana.
I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation.
Santata Gamana. Okay. Thank you.
And there are different series of books. This one is from the series called Real Yoga. This is book one of the Real Yoga series. There is a Serenade of Bliss series, in
That sounds
which,
nice.
yeah, and Tantra Exposed is, I think, book four in that series. In this one, the Real Yoga series, Kundalini Exposed is book three, and there is the first book in Serenade of Bliss series is Samadhi, the Forgotten Eden. So these are what he covers relates closely to what we're working on here. And
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned before, even though his book titles sound like tabloid headlines, the contents are actually I like the style. It's easy reading in terms of just it's not like profoundly academic. It doesn't get carried away and going too much into explaining philosophy, but it's also, I would say, it's not superficial. It's a good balance of depth and easy reading. And some of the books have some practices.
Yeah.
So it's a good it's good complementary reading for the program. And so I'd like to share here a practice from the book. In fact, I'll also read this, you could say, introductory section. This is part two of this book. Let me just see. Part one, just so to give you the context, is giving an overview about Kriya Yoga. So part one is called Kriya Yoga Gurus, Organizations, and Approach. So it's not fundamental to read that unless, let's say, you're really totally unfamiliar with Kriya Yoga, and then it might help to give it some context. But even so, Part two is where it gets more into the practice. So I'll start here. Part two, Kriya Yoga practice and spiritual direction. So it's chapter 11. This, by the way, in case you decide to order this online, this is an updated edition. It's not the first edition of this book. I think the first edition had a possibly this part that I'm going to read may not have changed much, but the first section, part one of the book, I think is what changed the most, because I read that before, or as well as reading this version, and I think it's got a much more critical overview of the Kriya Yoga lineages, kind of pointing out benefits and problems with the different lineages.
The updated one or the old one?
In the older one, it like he gives points to each of the gurus, saying, you know, this is a positive aspect, this is a negative aspect, and he doesn't do that kind of breakdown evaluation.
On Amazon, they have from October 2017.
So let me see which this one. That's the original edition. That's the first edition, and the updated edition was published in 2022, June 2022.
Okay. It says even the truth about Kriya Yoga gurus and organizations going beyond Kriya Yoga into non-duality.
That's the subtitle. So that may, based on that, it could be the same one. That's written here in the first page.
I will probably buy the ebook, but
okay.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Okay. So I'm starting here at chapter 11 in this more practical part of the book, part 2. In the Yoga Sutras, Maharishi Patanjali structures the practice of yoga into 8 limbs: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Succinctly speaking, they mean the following: yama, abstentions, moral guidelines, restraints for proper conducts, don'ts.
Yeah.
Niyama, ethical observances, positive duties, do's. Asana, posture, seated meditative posture. And I've mentioned this before, but in much of the ancient yoga, asana was basic. It was meditative posture, not elaborate, difficult stretching, gymnastics, balancing. It was for the most part seated posture for meditation. In some cases, it was inverted postures for influencing the energy flow, but those are the main things you find.
It didn't that what you call gymnastics developed also because many bodies, especially in the Western area, they're not able to be in these postures. So that's why all stretching, no?
But even before that, there was a movement within India to develop a more gymnastic yoga. There is a book called Yoga Body. I think that's the full title, Yoga Body. And I can't remember if it's by, no, it's not by James Mallinson, but it's by a guy who co-wrote a book with James Mallinson. Perhaps he actually mentions it here. His name begins with an S. Just a second. It's a good book on the history, let's say the modern history of yoga. I haven't read it actually, but I think I have a copy, and I've got it over there. So it's by Singleton, Mark Singleton. I've just had I'm a little bit familiar with it, but I haven't read it from beginning to end. So his study shows that with late 19th century, early 20th century, in Europe, there was a strong physical fitness movement, gymnastic, strength, body culture movement, and that there was a corresponding movement that developed in India to, in some sense, compete and show what we've got in our culture. This is our version. But rather than actually just presenting yoga, they developed yoga into a more physical form to meet this new kind of cultural interest. And so the more physical culture type of yoga developed in those circumstances, also with influence of students of Krishnamacharya, who was, he's one of the people at the root of modern yoga, but he's at the intersection between the old yoga and the new. Students of his include Iyengar and Pratabi Joyce, and they brought in a much greater focus on athleticism. And so that's, you could say that what came into the West had elements that was directly from that shift in meaning about yoga, with the emphasis on physical culture, which has some connection with Hatha Yoga and the interest in preserving the physical body, longevity. So that was there, but it was there within the context of also extending life to, as part of the fulfillment of human potential. So it wasn't for the aesthetic purpose of like, look how beautiful a human body can be. It was more like optimizing our functioning in and the physical and the visual aspect of the yoga body was a byproduct of a deeper process, and then it became a much more superficial thing. But I think that you'd be right to say that because of the West's special interest in the physique, in the physicality of the yoga, that it became very popular. That aspect became popular because other aspects of yoga did reach the West.
And India was also a British colony.
Yeah.
They influenced a lot. They changed the whole country, basically.
Yeah.
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 Or most of it.
But Krishnamacharya was sponsored by a one of the regional rulers. I think he was from Tamil Nadu, but I think he was living further up north in one of the, what's the word? One of the Maharajas, one of the, I'm not sure what the technical term is, but one of the rulers of one of the regions sponsored him and developed like yoga schools with a combination of the physical development, but also teaching the scriptures. So it was still a yoga that had the richness of scriptural teachings, meditation, these components associated with tantric yoga of bandha and mudra and pranayama. So all of that was still very present in his approach, and even an Ayurvedic personalized healing approach. So the way he was teaching asana was also individualized to the body type, the age of the person. And then his students like Iyengar and Pratabi Joyce and so on made it a much more generalized thing. It went from individual to big classes, everyone doing the same thing, with much less personalized, much less individually therapeutic aspect.
Okay.
Okay. So asana, posture, seated meditative posture. Pranayama, life force restraint, breath control. Pratyahara, internalization of the mind, sensory introversion. Dharana, concentration, one-pointedness of mind. Dhyana, meditation or unbroken contemplation. Samadhi, blissful absorption, union. So, short definitions of each of these key terms in Patanjali's Ashtanga. Just because we've also just been mentioning Krishnamacharya, Pratapi Joys, and Iyengar, the name Ashtanga that originally came from, especially associated historically with Patanjali, Pratapi Joys adopted the word Ashtanga for his approach to yoga, but basically changed the meaning because his approach to yoga really emphasized asana tremendously. And so it's strange to call his approach Ashtanga, meaning the 8 limbs, when you elevate one. And even one of the quotes that I remember seeing of his was that yoga is 99% action, 1% philosophy, something like that. And if you get too much bogged down in theory and philosophy, it's important to re-emphasize, bring back into the experience, the practical, the experiential. So it's a very important balance to create, but I'm not sure that 99-1 is balance. But so that's what he became famous for.
Yeah.
It is said that samadhi is the goal of yoga. And in this context, it means absorption into our true self, into pure blissful consciousness. The yogic development of the seeker is normally laid out in the following manner. Initially, a seeker observes and contemplates yamas and niyamas, trying to live by such principles. Then they practice asana until they learn how to properly sit for long periods in a relaxed yet alert meditative posture that is conducive to deep meditation. Afterward, they begin practicing life force restraint, pranayama, calming down their breath and mind until they reach a state of sensory introversion, pratyahara. Once pratyahara is achieved, the seeker can then perform concentration on their chosen object, dharana, until it becomes unbroken concentration, dhyana, which is the state of meditation. Through dhyana, they'll eventually become one with their object of meditation, samadhi. In traditional Kriya Yoga, through the power of Kriya Pranayama, a seeker performs so many rounds of pranayama that their mind goes directly from the 4th limb, from pranayama, to the 7th limb, dhyana. This turns Kriya Pranayama into a deep form of meditation on life force that will then lead the seeker to samadhi with it, burning through karmic seeds and mental impurities before these are grossly manifested. However, because the samadhi is with the life force, with the prana, which is a grosser form of the mind, and not with consciousness itself, which can be said to be the subtle form of the mind, the seeker will require years, decades, or even lifetimes to eventually experience samadhi with their own true self, through nirvikalpa samadhi. As the practice continues, various forms of samadhi can occur. Samadhi with the breath, samadhi with the cosmic life force, samadhi with the universal mind, and finally the much desired samadhi with one's true blissful self. Nonetheless, despite the propaganda that says that Kriya Yoga is a scientific process with a mathematical formula to enlightenment, there is in fact no guarantee of enlightenment because of subtle ingrained tendencies and karmic imprints called vasanas. This means that just because a seeker has achieved nirvikalpa samadhi, it doesn't make them truly enlightened, even if they experience such a samadhi over and over again. Kriya pranayama is one of the most soothing and blissful practices anyone could do. It's just fantastic. Through my own practice, I realized that with Kriya pranayama, I could be one with prana, and then from there, I'd go up the ladder. Prana is a subtler version of the breath. The mind is a subtler version of prana. Consciousness is a subtler version of the mind. As one progressed through the chimney of the spine, one would get into progressively subtler levels and eventually reach consciousness. This would require thousands of hours of pranayama until one would reach nirvikalpa samadhi. But as we've seen, this formless samadhi is not enlightenment. Then I discovered a better way, a faster and more direct approach. In this way, you perform pranayama, and once you reach dhyana, the state of deep meditation, you let go of pranayama and switch your focus to awareness itself, and abide in that self-awareness instead of continuing to focus on a subtle external object like prana. This made a huge difference. It seemed like nobody was listening to Lahiri Mahasaya when he said, "When the tranquility comes, don't do more Kriya." This is the key to the direct approach in Kriya Yoga. Lahiri Mahasaya pictured in this little picture here. There's I think right at the beginning of the book, a quote by him. "I remain present near one who practices Kriya." Quotes by him are interspersed throughout the book. A few quotes by Yogananda, but especially quotes by Lahiri Mahasaya. I'll share this other quote by Lahiri Mahasaya. "My worship is of a very strange kind. In this, Ganga water is not required. No special utensils are necessary. Even flowers are redundant. In this puja, all gods have disappeared, and emptiness has emerged with bliss." Another quote from him. "Clear your mind of dogmatic theological debris. Exchange unprofitable religious speculations for actual God contact." So you can see from these quotes the emphasis on experience rather than theory, rather than the let's say the cultural references, the cultural norms, the typical rituals that people invest in. And the spirit of that is very present throughout Tantra. The internalization of the teachings, the internalizations of the practices, the internalizations of the celestial reality, the idea or the practice, you could say, the remembrance of the inner self, including the physical, as a microcosmic reflection of the macrocosm, the totality reflected within the self. And even the let's say the deity or deities, in some sense dissolving within. In some cases, also in Tibetan Tantra, meditating on that interiorization, the identification with, and then you could say even the dissolution of that as a reference of something that has form and characteristics, dissolving through the bliss of that union, of that fullness, resting in the totality. Were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. So the next, chapter 12, first Kriya and beyond. The manner in which Kriya Yoga is usually taught is not the best for dissolving your false identity and having the recognition of being God. It has too much emphasis on techniques. Techniques end up being the goal instead of the means. One must understand that techniques are used to reach one stage. Once you get there, you must let go of the technique itself. How many practitioners have we seen who are so attached to the techniques that they can't clearly see that the techniques are actually binding them and preventing them from going further? Kriya Yoga is a means, not the goal. God is the goal. Pure consciousness is the goal. Your true you is the goal. Therefore, you should never get too attached to the techniques, no matter how beautiful they are or how soothing their effects make you feel. This understanding can be game-changing in your Kriya Yoga path. A quote from an autobiography of a yogi. A quote by Badhuri Mahasaya, the levitating saint, talking with Paramahamsa Yogananda. You go often into the silence, but have you developed anubhava, direct experience of God? And then Paramahamsa is reflecting on this statement by the saint. And he says, he was reminding me to love God more than meditation. Do not mistake the technique for the goal. End of quote. You must be open and willing to let go of all the ideas and beliefs you have accumulated in the past. Sure, at first, you're so motivated and inspired that you love the techniques, and that indeed helps you cultivate a regular meditation practice. After a certain point, though, it is necessary to drop the emphasis on the techniques and focus on who is witnessing what's happening. What does this mean? If God is pure consciousness, then God is formless. If God is formless, it cannot be a chakra, prana, or any object we're focused on. God is not an object of meditation. Consciousness is not an object of meditation. We use our consciousness as the subject, while the technique itself is the object. For example, every time we're chanting a mantra on a chakra, we're actually using our mind to mentally chant a mantra focused on a subtle energy vortex or chakra. This means the chakra is exterior to us. This means the mantra is exterior to us. It is all third-person meditation. We must turn around and do first-person meditation. That's what the known Paravashta state of Kriyā is. You stay as yourself, just being. Using the mind to overcome the mind is very tough, as the mind is very hard to crack. What we must do is still the mind first and then revert it back to itself. Then we won't be using the mind at all, mental processes or mental activities, but just reposing the mind on itself. This is the proper way. This is subjective practice and the way to dive into our true self. There is, remember when I suggest a 4 core characteristic model for defining Tantra or for helping us have a foundational and broad understanding of what we're focusing on when we speak of Tantra. One of the 4 characteristics is nonconformity, and that was, I think, quite evident in the Lahiri Mahasaya quotes, the putting aside the usual religious attachments, let's say, going just deep into experience itself. Also wanted to reflect here on sometimes there is a confusion that arises for practitioners, and you can come across this when people come to you as a guide, facilitator, as a support in their spiritual journey. They come with ideas about non-duality, ideas they may have heard from Muji or from Nisargadatta Maharaj or Sri Ramana Maharshi. They have these ideas of, let's say, radical non-dual concepts. that there is nothing to do because our nature is the self. So any practice we do is in some sense moving away from abiding as the self. And I've mentioned before, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj pretty much stated that, any path leads you away from truth because the truth is your starting point. The truth is all there is. So if you're, let's say, convincing yourself there's a journey to take, in some sense, you're reaffirming distance from the absolute to here, where you are right now. In some sense, this is connected here with the idea of getting too attached to the technique and too attached to, let's say, focusing on and valuing something that's, in some sense, exterior to the ground of our being. And in the previous class, I kept repeating over and over, balance between technique or application, intention, let's say, a doing attitude, and the openness to grace, the receptivity, the embrace in this very moment of the communion with the divine. And to me, this is what he's speaking of also when speaking of the attachment to technique, and also the words of Lahiri Mahasaya about when you reach, let's say you reach the state of meditation through the techniques, through the pranayama and so on, you reach a meditative state. Don't keep pushing with practice, with effort. At that point, you're able to rest in that graceful receptivity. And so it's a shift, in using Santata Gamana's words, that you could say it's a shift from third-person meditation to first-person meditation, where consciousness itself becomes the only thing that is being, perhaps contemplated isn't even quite the word because that implies an externality, but it's a resting in consciousness rather than a focusing on doing something or focusing on even a subtle sensation associated with prana.
But the kriyas or any technique is there to prepare the body and start controlling the mind. And at one point, it's just happening, and you can miss that when you're too focused on the technique that you're already there. I had this, like with the body, I had it I once learned autogenic training because I had problems to relax. And you go through the whole body, and you tell about each part of the body, I'm heavy and warm, blah, blah, blah. So until the whole nervous system comes on. And very quickly, after a few sessions, I would just lay down and my body already I felt like the energy flowing everywhere. And so the body was already there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's a fundamental principle. We retrain the patterns. We're rewiring ourselves. We're creating new foundational body memories, sensation references. Because if we're in the habit of busyness, in the habit of sympathetic nervous system activation, it's very difficult to be still and restful, because there's a nervousness that comes in when we're physically still, because we're inside in the rhythm of movement, activity, resolving things, thinking about problems and what's the solution, thinking about the future and evaluating. So to shift from that sympathetic nervous system activation, like you said, it requires a profound shift, that it's not just about experiencing it once, but it's a familiarity that the whole system gains until it becomes enough to just lie down, and it's, you could say, remembered. Not just the mind remembering, but the whole body just comes back into that state. It's a new pattern. It's a new ground level reference. It's a new default that we can access
Yeah.
more and more easily. And I would say ultimately even spontaneously arising, not depending on lying down, just a quality of presence that becomes more and more available.
Yeah. I have one more question to that. I'm
Yeah.
listening to a book right now. It's called Shakti Rising, and it's about the female goddess qualities.
Is
I
it
think
the
I
Kavita Chinnamayan book?
uh wait, I can no, I cannot tell you which one.
That's okay.
Ah, here. Uh, sorry for my dogs. Shakti Rising, embracing shadow and light on the goddess path of wholeness. Kavita
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. She's a
China.
friend of mine. Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, she's
Yeah.
a friend of yours.
I like her. Yeah, yeah. I interviewed her once, and we've been in touch over the years. Um, I haven't read
Yeah.
that book. I have a couple of her books, but I've only I haven't studied her books. I haven't gone in depth into them, but I like her work, and yeah, I
Yeah.
like her and I like her
It's
work.
very, the introduction is very nice. Uh, so it's about the 10 Mahavidyas, the
Yeah,
10 wisdom goddesses. So yeah, I couldn't recall it. And in the introduction, she also talks about Tantra and the Tantric philosophy, and it's very nice, like 1 hour, very perfect summary. But anyway, she
great.
talks about the
Share
the
any
in,
quotes from it if you like in the Telegram group. If you see like really nice.
I'm listening to
Ah,
it as an
okay.
audio.
Yeah,
I can write it down.
yeah.
Yeah. No, but she talks about the progressive, so indirect way
Uh-huh.
to enlightenment or samadhi, and the direct way. So, and she says or that's, oh no, she quotes some book or something. So the progressive way is gradually through practice, you reach higher states of consciousness, and the direct way is you just remember basically and go there. Yeah. And my question is, do I interpret that right, correctly? That the direct way is just going there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
once, uh, in my practice, many people that don't know what unconditional love feels like. They just don't know what love feels like,
Yeah.
the real love. So uh, I
Sorry.
do a practice in which I transmit them this feeling so they can feel it in their own body. And from my experience, then you can recall, like I can recall such states once I have experienced them. The same with the autogenic training,
Yeah.
I don't need to do the whole meditation anymore. I just can go to that state of being. Is that the direct way
Yes.
to connect with God?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, you could say that, and exactly like you were saying, if people don't remember, they don't have a felt sense of any memory of what it means to be loved or to feel safe, right? To
Yeah,
feel wholeness, then it's very difficult for them to do anything other than the gradual step-by-step path. It's a transformation of their state of consciousness, their whole rhythm of their psychobiology, right? There's a shift in biochemistry. It's a whole process of entering into a feeling of safety, calmness, connectedness. It's gradual. But like you said, once there has been the experience of connectedness, wholeness, peace, a profound sense of safety that actually feels like that's the ground reality. That safety is not just, oh, I feel safe for a moment because the door's closed. No, no, it's a sense that this safety is associated with your true nature, with the real ground of existence. Like that's reality. And when that new, let's say, definition of what reality and what existence means, what the self means, when there is a shift in existential like reference, then that direct path can be recalled. It can be accessed. It's just a reminder. It's an availability that is almost just a matter of like, I focus on the busyness of my mind, or I open to resting in the ground of existence, in the fullness of my being. And it becomes a kind of choice. The more familiar it is, the more easy. It's just no, I'm not going that way. I'm just going to rest in this. It's a matter of where you're investing, how you're investing your energy, your focus, you're either dispersing your attention, fragmenting it, or you're letting yourself rest in the wholeness. And what you described is exactly what this approach involves. You know, the reason, again, that the grace flow practice is let's say the ground of these practices and this approach is because it begins with helping to provide a sense of safety, a shift in rhythm from action, doing, into a restful sense of connectedness, safety, wholeness. And if there's residual stuff that needs to be integrated, then also that's part of the meditation, you could say, you know, that we're creating space for whatever needs to be integrated, so that also becomes an ongoing principle, that we go out of the habit of avoidance, of pain and discomfort, because it's too much for us, to a new habit of this space. I can breathe through it. I can feel safe enough to access whatever there is residually to digest and to feel, you know. And so it's creating you could say a wholeness inducing habit rather than a fragmented self habit, which is generally what we learn. We learn to be in urgency mode, where there's no time to integrate and digest, because we're in, you know, jumping from one problem to the next, always feeling that also our base reference is a sense of incompleteness. That's what we've been taught is the nature of the self, the nature of reality. It's fragmented. It's you know, a dead universe, let's say. And so we're going in the practice to a sense of living connectedness. Yeah. Also, what you described relates to all this in terms of once the direct path is available to you, the technique changes the importance of it is it's different how we relate to the technique, you know, because before the technique was the only way that we were going to experience a change in our state of consciousness. And then it becomes a way that we can change our state of consciousness, but we can also just rest back in beingness. So a question that I leave open is, does the technique cease to have any value once the direct path is possible for us? Or could it still have value? And I'll give some answer, but not with the intention of closing the question. But the value that can exist with some of these techniques is that it's like accessing parts of our being, parts of our energetic, our energy body, our psyche, our shadow, bringing more effectively, you could say, digging in, creating, opening doors within the psyche, within the energy body, in a way that just resting and feeling peace may not have quite exactly the same effect. It feels enough, right? Feeling peace, like when you feel peace, you don't feel like you have any goals, anything else you need to do. So it feels good enough to just rest. But what could happen is that subtle, latent, unresolved things are still there. They're just very subtle. So they're not creating preoccupation. They're not getting in the way of accessing peace. But that peace is, it's available, but it also has a moment where suddenly, okay, I got to do stuff. I've got, like, there's a moment of coming back into a sense of, I got to do stuff. You know, maybe a seed of anxiety suddenly sprouts out of the stillness. A sense of incompleteness is sort of reawakened because it's there latent. There are unresolved things as well as the capacity to experience wholeness. And so the active practices, the Kriyas, are engaging with deep residues, those latent seeds, and burning up those deeper seeds, you know? So you can think of it as a long-term a practice to be able to sustain peace, not just to access it, but to sustain it.
Or like finding sand in the pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
After 10 years, there's still one corn.
After 10 years, what?
After after 10 years, you still find 1 or 2 cent corns in the pockets, even after a lot of cleansing.
Yeah. 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 So it's it's profound, deep energy work, consciousness work, shadow work, if you like, that is designed for. Well, it's when you think of that quality of depth, that the fantastic stories of immortal yogis that appear and disappear and do miracles, that's when these things start to perhaps have a new meaning. Not just a myth, an interesting, inspiring story that probably doesn't have any reality, but when we, let's say, push through the easy samadhi and let's say dig deeper into substituting old patterns, even deeper ones, with light, with consciousness, with energy, with vibrancy. So there is a transformation of the energy body, because that's what these practices involve. These Siddha practices, Kriya practices, Laya, Kundalini, they go. They're not just. It's not just to access samadhi. It's also to make your transformation complete and sustained. So there's just a couple of pages left, 3 pages technically, to reach the end of this chapter. Didn't get to a practice because I ended up giving more kind of commentary. The next chapter we can read together next time, and it does go more into techniques after. But in this, there are some charts here which are not that easy to like decode. Let me just see if I can show you. Maybe I'll do I'll send a photo so you can take time to have a look at this. It's supposed to help to understand the idea of the different stages, like third person meditation to first person meditation. So in one of these pictures, you have us, consciousness, mind, object of meditation. Some of the writing is very small, so it says at the other part, using the mind's power of attention to focus on chanting a mantra or on breathing or moving prana, etc., etc. So there's a focus on an object of meditation, ultimately. And he says, we practice like this until the mind gets very still and controlled. The first Kriyā. That's phase 1. And phase 2, there's no mind activity, just being. The object of meditation is the absence of objects, emptiness. So, whereas first, the consciousness is, let's say, the focus is on mind, mental processes, activities, on an object of meditation. It then becomes a focus on, you could say, on mind itself, on awareness. Okay? So, phase 2, the mind reverts to itself, just being. This is consciously taking advantage of the after effect poise of Kriyā. This is a term used by Lahiri Mahasaya, the after effect poise of Kriyā. Instead of having to do hours of Kriyā to attain this just being state, we notice it and stay with it, which he refers to as the final Kriyā. And then phase 3, just us, pure blissful existence, remaining in consciousness, or as consciousness. Only consciousness remains. The mind was dissolved as it can't stand on its own without an object. The mind flourishes with objects and dies, in quotation, dies with the bliss of emptiness. The nature of consciousness is Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss. Your true nature is Sat Chit Ananda. Instead of doing hundreds of Kriya pranayamas, tokars, another Kriya practice, and so on, we control the mind via pranayama and a few other techniques, and then go consciously and directly to the after effect poise of Kriya. And that's similar to what you were describing, that sense of wholeness, completeness, restfulness, the after effect poise of Kriyā. This means that we just need 2 Kriyas. The first is to stabilize and still the mind, phase 1. And the final Kriya is to turn it towards itself, phase 2, until all that is left is our bliss consciousness, phase 3. This is the secret that has never been properly shared before in the history of Kriya Yoga. So I think it's not so different to what I share. So I, to some extent, agree that this is a kind of secret, a kind of unrevealed, profound teaching. But it's not that it is a secret or not known, but that it's easily overlooked. Even when it's mentioned, it's easily overlooked because our habit of pushing for a result, our tendency to value the form of practice rather than the naturalness of beingness. These are habitual rhythms that we're in. And so the teaching is available, but it's still as if it's a secret, as if it's not being properly transmitted or explained. So I think that, he's speaking the same language as me pretty much. I know.
Master.
Say again?
The master of meditation.
Beautiful. So this is the secret that has never been properly shared before in the history of Kriya Yoga. I know that from the perspective of the mind, this sounds too simple to be true, but it is the truth. It is the mind that creates and loves complex things, as well as elaborate and complicated techniques. Complexity helps the ego mind stay alive instead of dissolving it into emptiness. Ramana Maharshi's comments on this. The mind turned outwards results in thoughts and objects. Turned inwards, it becomes itself, the self, God. To ask the mind to kill the mind is like making the thief the policeman. He will go with you and pretend to catch the thief, but nothing will be gained. From Be As You Are, the teachings of Sri Ramana Maharshi. Lahiri Mahasaya's words from Yogiraj Sri Lahiri Mahasaya and his 108 pieces of advice. All sins are destroyed at the after effect poise of Kriyā. Avidya, ignorance, is the outward state of mind. Vidya, knowledge, is the after effect poise of Kriyā. This revelation, end of quote, this revelation will make the journey back to God so much faster. This is transforming Kriya Yoga into a direct path towards the self. Now that we understand what is to be done, let's get started. So that introduces the practices. And yeah, if you find the PDF, then perhaps you'll start engaging with the practices before Friday. Otherwise, we'll cover this together on Friday.
Do you recommend that me doing it without introduction?
If you feel the time and the inspiration to do it, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
It can be good to get engaged with it. It's I have mixed feelings about reading all of the book. I mean, obviously, also it's not the best use of our time, but there are aspects of the techniques that I promised not to share publicly, but they are available publicly, in this book, and I've also got another much.
You promised to your teacher not to share them.
Yeah, and so some of these are different to how I learned them, and so I am still in alignment with my promise to explore different versions of the technique and to explain them. They've become more and more publicly available, also through this book here. Kriyā Secret.
Is it also from Santata?
No, this one is J.C. Stevens, and this one is really only for people that are really, really interested in Kriya Yoga, because it's much more in depth, and it's good. It's a good book. If you're wanting to, let's say, just get straight into the practice, Santata Gamana's books are a good summary. Like I said, it's a pretty good balance of it. It's not superficial. It includes the philosophical aspects, the technical and the practical. And I would say this book, it gives more context, more philosophical teachings, a little bit more technical teachings as well. So it's a matter of preference. You might like to dive in and like immerse yourself in the teachings through this book, because there is value in that. There is value in that. I wouldn't say that you can just skip over it necessarily, and that the Santata Gamana's books what everyone would benefit more from. Some people will benefit more by really immersing themselves in the field of the teachings, because by jumping, let's say, into those tabloid headline type books of Kriya Yoga Exposed, there's something that happens in the mind also where it's like a part of us doesn't feel convinced. Like it can't, like one of the last things he said, it may sound too simple, but it's the truth, right? If a part of us is not totally convinced, like it can't be that simple, then a part of us is going to keep looking for something else. So part of the transmission is, you could say, calming the whole system, including the mind that is always trying to come up with, but what if? Oh, but what else? You know? So the immersion in the field of the teachings, and you could say a respectful relationship to the teachings, to the lineages, it can have a more profound effect than to just get a, let's say, shortcut book that gives you the practices. It has multiple aspects, you know, the benefits and the risks, let's say.
Iyengar in his book Light on Yoga, he also speaks about Kriyas, no? And
Yeah.
Kriya Yoga. Mm.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't. I actually had a copy of that book many years ago, but I don't remember. I suspect that he's speaking of Kriyas in a more Hatha Yoga context than in a Kriya Yoga context, because
Yeah,
it has a different meaning.
yeah. I remember he describes a Kriya as a like an exercise with a certain
Purification.
type of position and certain type of pranayama. Yeah.
So it could be. It could be that he's talking about the same principle, let's say, of
Mm.
Kriya being a combination of techniques like bandha, mudra, focus, pranayama, mantra. So the combination of these elements
Yeah.
uh, composes a Kriya.
Yeah. I don't have the book anymore, so yeah.
I think it.
It's very big.
I think possibly the person who introduced me to Kriya Yoga gave me a copy of that book, if I remember correctly. It was one of the first books on yoga, perhaps, that I had.
Mm.
All right. Let me know if anything you want to share, anything comes up until before Friday. If you start reading the book and anything comes up that you want to share, let me know.
Okay. Thank
Big
you.
hug. Lots of love to
Big hug.
you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
See you Friday. Ciao.